with a very positive note, saying that the opportunities and resources are much, much better today than what it was 20 years, 25 years ago when we started as, young scientists or young faculty. What I'm seeing is these days, as I told you, the funding opportunities are much, much better. And we happen to review grants and we happen to sit in the, those committees. And so what I experience is young people coming there, everybody thinks I should get a 50 lakh grant or 80 lakh grant or a crore grant. And if I don't get that, I won't be able to do science. But that is not the case. My advice to all people who are starting would be start with a small budget. Be very clear about your objectives, be very clear about what you want to do. Write the grant so that you can get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
When you're talking about the opportunities, so many of our students or the postdocs, so there is no specific opportunities are seen. So basically it's like we need to train our scientists to focus and how to obtain the how to grab the opportunities at the right time. So that is what that is the thing which we are lagging behind.
Yes, it is the responsibility for on us to mentor our youngsters in that regard. And as I said, forums like this, if we can meet on regular basis, say once in a year or something like that. So I think many youngsters would be benefited by it.
I'm Dr. Prabha Chandra and I'm a professor of psychiatry at INHANS. Let me first start with what is a mentor. I'm going to talk about mentoring and mentorship. A mentor is somebody who's interested in you as an individual, okay, as a person. And a mentor is somebody who's responsible in some way, in some formal way, about your growth as an individual and as a researcher. So, having given you this definition of a mentor, I want to know from the students here, show of hands, how many of you think you have a mentor? Okay, so and how many of your students? Postdocs? Okay, so I get a feeling that though there are so many students and so many postdocs, it's only a minority who really have a mentor in the true sense of the word. How many of you here are teachers or superiors? How many of you have been true mentors based on this definition? Be interested in people as individuals and be responsible for their growth. Somewhat similar, probably 50%, slightly better. A good mentor does not sit on a chair and look down on you and advise you saying, do this, don't do this, in my time I did this, I worked so hard. A true mentor tries to understand who you are in your reality and then tries to work with you in that reality. And I think that's something that mentoring is something which has not been, it has happening in a very informal manner in most institutions, in most universities. It doesn't really happen in a formal manner, mainly because like somebody, I think Dr. Shashibala mentioned, that even most of the scientists, women scientists are so pressed for their own time. We are furthering our own careers so much that mentoring takes time. To sit with somebody and put yourself in somebody's shoes and try to understand that person's reality and be able to be an advocate for that person requires a lot of time and energy from yourself. And I'm not sure how much time and energy as scientists we are actually willing to give, because that is not measured. That is not recognized. That is not considered as something which is important for promotion. So one of my suggestions would be that there should actually be accountability of mentorship. That mentorship should be part of your CV. How many people have you actually mentored? Should be a recommendation for your promotion, like your publication. But I think as students, it's your job also to try and find the right mentor. Finding the right mentor, somebody has said, is like falling in love. You know it when you find it. It's like that. And I think that you make that right click with that person. The person seems to understand you. You seem to understand that person. And I think that's what all of us need to look at. A mentor is not just somebody who looks at advises you about grants, about opportunities. Somebody mentioned that so many young girls fritter away, there's attrition at a younger age. I think the mentorship should start at that point. What is very interesting is those people who had mentors, they have found that had more number of publications, more research grants. The people who had mentors had better career satisfaction. The scientists who had mentors became very good mentors later because they actually learned what it is to be a good mentor. I would say that it's important for women scientists to also mentor men because then I think they make better husbands for women scientists. It's important for women scientists also to have men scientists as mentors. Sorry, both women and men. Because men scientists will teach you how to resolve conflicts sometimes. They will teach you how to negotiate. Because these are skills which is something which Dr. Anita was mentioning, that these are some things which are not inborn for women. We try to avoid conflicts. The final thing that I want to say is right now in the workspace, we are dealing with 3 generations, right? We are not dealing with one generation. And these generations have marked variations between each other. The president of the American Medical Association, I heard her speaking, and she talked about the Gen X, the Gen Y, and the Gen Z, and how in the workspace you have 3 generations. So I think when we become mentors, we need to remember that we need to keep the sensitivities of each of this generation in sync. Finally, I would say that given the critical mass that is still so less in women scientists, we are not there. I would say use mentoring, use virtual mentoring, use online mentoring. I think we need to think of more creative ways of mentoring rather than always having a face-to-face, sitting with each other across the table mentoring. If you think that you want to, my biggest mentor was a professor in the UK whom I had just met twice in my life. But he has always been my mentor, continues to be my mentor. So access sources outside of your system.
So this is with regard to the generations that you're dealing with in the workspace. So even in the survey, the kind of reflections that came were very different from the older women scientists, the women scientists who were in their middle ages, and the younger women scientists. They almost live in 3 different worlds. And it's very important when you're talking of the core committee that you have to constitute. The report has recommended that you need to take younger people on the core committee because they also need to be represented because their experience is very different from the experience of the older scientists than from who are in the middle.
I feel that we should also ask the opinion of the mentee, whether he really wants a mentor. Because most often, how many of you would like to have a mentor now that you know what is mentee, what is a mentor, and how many students are there? Everyone wants. Oh, that's a wonderful thing.
Mentoring actually requires training. Some people are born mentors. Some people are the kind of people whom students flock to because they feel that they understand students. So I think there are actually training programs available for being a good mentor, what you should do as a mentor, what you should not do as a mentor, the boundaries of mentorship. Mentorship also meaning not making the person dependent on you, being able to let go of the person when she wants to grow the nest. So I think your point is very valid.
According to me, these are sociological questions. And like how we address questions, scientific questions in our lab, we need to address these questions also on an evidence-based manner. If you don't do that, we will come up with knee-jerk responses, and that may be counterproductive. I am telling this also with the strength of the argument that E. Balaram has made some comments recently, 6 months ago probably, in a slightly different context. He mentioned that, he argued that, this is with reference to higher education. Yeah? He argued that higher education sector should not wait for the government to make policies. On the other hand, the higher education sector should start demanding policies, should set the goal and the benchmark of the policies and even the details of the policies, so that the government or whoever up there in Delhi can work on it and understand the impulses of the impulses of the people at the grassroots level and do some rigorous or some effective develop some effective measures. You know about the people in 19th century could not write a novel and publish in their names. where were large number of people before the French Revolution, that is in 1789? Where was science before let's say, before 18th century? So there's a whole lot of history. Now I'm excited about this because this is for the first time that this is also associated with the IAN satellite meeting. Now, none of the professional bodies that we have, professional scientific bodies, ever does an evaluation of what they have been doing. That is, what type of science that we have been doing. We have sessions, parallel sessions of different stuff, all narrow areas that we have been doing, not even looking at the science education. This type of evaluation has been a common feature in US, UK, Germany, etc., particularly from 1980s onwards. But we have not been doing that. So what I have been trying to tell you is, I'll take another 2 minutes to show this, is that we need to really take a very rigorous analysis of the situation. And that I think we have started there. Yeah. Historically speaking, I think there's a huge, we all talk about ancient India and ancient great features of the ancient society and stuff like that. Yes, we had too many good things. There was Gargi, I think somebody has pointed out some. Gargi has been arguing with the Yajnavalkya. And there is also another side of that. Yajnavalkya said that, woman, stop your argument, otherwise your head will split. And he stopped it. You understand what I'm talking about? There has been freedom to talk like that for some time, but it also means that freedom has been also quelled. Unless we seriously get involved in other sciences, other than neuroscience and other than biological sciences, particularly social sciences, we will not be able to make any headway in policy making. What we are talking about is that our impress upon people who are making the policy.
So next speaker is Dr. Maulishree. She is a very senior person from the Department of IT and BT.
Very recently we had a big slowdown where the industrial growth was less and the Sensex collapsed and things were not very nice, right? Even during the extreme economic times, the biotech industry and the pharma sector were the only sectors that had a remarkable growth of 20%. So if I present that to you, what is the, this is the result that I present to you. So what is the interpretation or conclusion that you draw from that? That means that there is an opportunity there. That means that there is a possibility that we are reluctant to explore. Today, the industry is actually stepping out of the conventional boundary of an industry which is only doing production. Today, a lot of R&D work happens in industry, and these positions which actually are available in plenty, they are finding dearth of talent to accommodate. So here we have a very interesting situation where you have qualified people who are saying there isn't any job available, there isn't any opportunity available. And when the government turned around and spoke to industry, the industry is reflecting a picture which says, well, we have positions and we are unable to fill them. So with that kind of a lacuna being identified, it was very mind-boggling to explain this equation. The left and the right hand side are not balanced. That is when the government came up with a very interesting program called the Finishing School, wherein we try and bridge this gap. There are two kinds of problems. One is number of proposals which are received for a given grant are overwhelming. And most of them are rejected for the quality of the content. The contrary response that is given is there is a certain kind of fund which is set aside for, let's say, a technology or a equipment development or a diagnostic development. We are not getting good proposals, those funds are reversed. There are a lot of senior people like Dr. Raju who know more about it than I do, but the way we have been trying to go around to higher learning institutions and talk to the teachers is, or to the researchers is, work together in a group, get associated, form a strong, solid proposal, get each other's projects being peer reviewed before you submit it forward. And when you share resources, your possibilities become endless.
Thank you, Dr. Maulishree, for giving us a different perspective and identifying new opportunities.
More often than not, many of these industries, when they have R&D section or even a research wing, they have specific goals. So we must kind of keep pure scientific endeavors separate from an industrial approach, because they're always output driven, and many a times in science we do have negative results which needs to go at its own pace. And perhaps I'm speaking from my own little experience, having been in an industry for a while. And research questions are also driven by the motto of certain industries. They may have a philanthropic or a offshoot of their income tax reduction strategies that they use for perhaps for giving it for research and R&D kind of department. I think if we discuss more from a pure science growth, these two kept separately perhaps would be better.
Certainly, what you said is right, that an industry is always bottom line driven. There isn't any doubt about it. But what we're trying to identify here in this forum is trying to give you opportunities which are alternate to what is being discussed so far. So there will be issues, for example, academics would say that industry have got the bottom line and that's all that defines their work. They wouldn't take up a blue sky research, for example. So industry turns around and says academics actually have very low standards of, they don't get into applied. There isn't any real outcome of that. Therefore, there is no funding that is going into it. If the society saw something that is going back to the society and touching them, there wouldn't be any reason why there shouldn't be money that is going into it, number one. And number two, industry is very skeptical in giving out research which is very sensitive in nature because of disclosure issues. So there are issues both ways. I'm not saying that this is something which is very green in nature and you can just go ahead and go for a hog. It's not like that. All I'm saying is there is an opportunity and you need to take your calculated risks.
I'm a pharmacologist, clinical pharmacologist, but earlier on we used to see Novartis and AstraZeneca coming forward. But of late, I think for the last 5 or 6 years, none of them have approached. So maybe there is kind of a gap in the communication.
Could be, just need to pursue that.
So maybe Dr. Bindu can take this forward to put